On this episode of Industry Relations, Rob and I talk about the Rapattoni outage and lessons learned. Join us. This is Industry Relations, a podcast that's at the intersection of real estate and technology from an insider's perspective, with Rob Hahn and Greg Robertson.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of Industry Relations with Rob and Greg. This is your co-host, Rob Hahn, Notorious Rob, coming to you from like a hotel lobby with bad internet, so we'll see how this goes. As always, my co-host, the fabulous Greg Robertson. Woo!
Hola, Rob.
Okay, what is the symbol that you're doing now?
Well, I was going to do my thing, and like I've got this mic. We're getting some work done in our master bathroom, and it's like really loud where I normally record. So I've come to the garage studio, and then I had that weird mic last time. So I found this. I found this old mic, and I'm trying to make it work for this. So sorry. Yeah.
All right. Man, I'm using AirPods over hotel Wi-Fi, so you know, it's amazing technology lets us do this at all. Yeah. You know, I want to look at the bright side of things, but. Yeah, how are you?
Good, man. Just another day in the life here. We're getting ready for everybody. We go. My kids go back to school a little bit later. They don't go back until after Labor Day. But okay. My wife is already putting the work in. You know, she teaches fifth grade, so she's getting the classroom set up and all those kind of things. And both my kids go. My other kids go to high school, right? So Hope's in high school. She'll be a freshman, and then Toby's a junior. And Hope made the JV tennis team for her.
All right. Congratulations, Hope.
She's done remarkably well. She's had 2 matches. I think she's like, 5 and 3 and 2, something like that, or 4 and 2.
Wow.
Yeah, no, she's doing good.
Wow. All right. Yeah. Well, congratulations. I guess it is back to school. We should do an episode about back to school. We should do an episode about schooling. I have this whole thing about that. But today, actually, we wanted to maybe talk about, because this is going to be a relatively shorter one, since I'm traveling and who knows. This Rapattoni situation is finally resolved, right?
Yeah.
Was it 2 weeks?
Yeah, it was about 2 weeks. I mean, I'm hearing it's like, it's not fully resolved where, I mean, they're starting to get their MLSs back online. From what I'm hearing, like they've got the data all the way back to the 6th. I think so that's a little bit further back than when they went off, but they're still getting photos figured out and then their AMS stuff. So, I mean, it's just a brutal experience. And it's, you don't want to cast shadows there because, you know, a malware or ransom attack like that can almost happen to anybody. I mean, I don't know, maybe like a CoreLogic or Black Knight might be a little bit immune because they have other things to protect, but who knows, right?
No, what's shocking, so I don't know the details. So do you know the details? It was a ransomware attack is the only thing I've heard, right?
Yeah, I don't know any details beyond that, no.
Because I remember it was probably 2019. I remember going to an event. I was speaking, but the other person that was speaking there was like a cybersecurity expert. Mm-hmm. It was a First American event, and talk about ransomware and how dangerous it is, yada yada yada. But you know, my understanding of ransomware is like somebody has to like click something or do something. You know what I mean? It doesn't just infect your system. You have to take some sort of action, like downloading a PDF or something.
Well, to get them to take over, yeah. So there's, I mean, phishing attacks. That's all very sophisticated. But I mean, basically, it's like a business. I mean, they sell software for companies. I think probably in Europe or something to start these companies to do ransom companies, and they have like tech support and all that kind of stuff. And basically, you know, they do a phishing campaign or whatever ways they can get into the system. They get in the system, they lock it up, and then they demand money. And there are companies, insurance companies that hire negotiators for the company to kind of get it resolved. Because I think a lot of times the only way of getting it resolved is actually negotiating a freaking payout. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Ransom, right? Paying them off. Yeah. So that was my question. Like, so first of all, it's like obviously Rapattoni they had a lapse in security. Something happened, right? Somebody clicked on something, and now it infected their system, which sucks. I mean, it's awful. But I guess I do wonder, like, did they just pay it off? Or did they say, screw that, we're not paying it, we're going to start it over from scratch? Because the 2-week timeline suggests to me that they didn't pay the ransom.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that'd be just conjecture on my part, at least. So who knows? I mean, it might be if that's what it took to negotiate, and that's what it's taken. Maybe they paid, and it's been taking them a while to kind of get everything kind of ramped up to get all their customers back up going. I mean, who knows? There could be 1,000 reasons.
Who knows? Yeah. But like one of the things that came up though when this first started popping up was, at least among like the prop tech people, they're talking about like, did they not have a hot backup, or even a cold backup site? Do you any details around that?
I mean, and then well, just to segue into that, what I did like about this whole situation, not like, but the industry did come together a lot. I know that other MLS vendors like CoreLogic and Black Knight were there to kind of help people out. I mean, I think RPR was a good for one reason. That the money they've been spending on RPR, they had their shining moment there for 2 weeks. You saw CRMLS help out. Then there was this initiative launched by Morgan Carey of Real Estate Webmasters of MLS Backup. So, but to me, it's a little bit of like a misnomer of all the MLS, most of the MLS organizations out there, they don't do any hosting. There are a few that still do, but so they're being hosted by Rapattoni, by CoreLogic, by Black Knight, right?
That's right.
All those guys are, FBS, whatever. All those guys are big organizations. They have their own, data centers. They back up regularly, everything else. It's not a matter of like, in fact, I think in certain markets that have Rapattoni, you could go to an IDX website and see the data there. It's not a matter of backing up, really. It's more of a matter of changes, listing input, add edits, when a property sold, when the price changed, when it was pending, when it was active, those kind of things you couldn't do. So, is it a good idea to have I'm certain, like I said, CoreLogic or FPS has several backups, but a third party beyond your MLS to do that? I mean, maybe this is really a rare thing that happens. Sure. But it could be something. I know that I think Morgan, I was talking to him. He's, Tim Dane over at North Star MLS they were talking to, I think, another MLS out there as well. There might be a market for that type of thing, but still, again, it's more about how do you get something up and running? And then the other tricky part is like, okay, let's say it's a week, it's 2 weeks later, it's 3 weeks later. Then how do you get those changes up into the system that launched again? And that's in itself a whole thing. So it's a bit more complicated than just having a backup, right? I think,
Well, I'm not saying, because again, I just don't know, right? I just don't know. But based on what what this situation looks like is either one of two things, right? Either this ransomware infected everything, including their backups, right? That's one possibility. The second possibility, though, is that what's backed up is not the system as a whole. It's just like the data. You know what I mean? And to your point, if you backed up only the data, and then there have been changes along the way, then you're missing days, right? Then you're missing all the updates. I don't know the answer to that. One thing that kind of makes me think, though, again, going back to this First American cybersecurity thing, because of ransomware, apparently a lot of the companies are now running all their systems in virtual machines, right? So that the virtual machine is taken over, they just shut it down and just start a new instance, as opposed to like the traditional like database and our code is all in this like computer server, and now we got infected and now we're fucked. It's more that was sort of the understanding from 2019. I don't know if that's commonplace. I don't know if that's I just don't know.
That's way over my head. I'm not a NOC engineer or those kind of things. I'm not sure exactly how the hot backups work or what. When you get infected with this malware, what happens? I mean, is it
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of, it's just a bad thing to happen. And I'm glad it's over with for those guys. And it was really good to see the industry kind of step up and help each other out on this. And hopefully we get back to some sort of normal.
That part's great. The thing that made me just kind of go, huh, I didn't realize, was specifically Zenlist with Zillow, I think essentially stood up an alternative MLS for, I think it was SFAR.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, right?
It was a combination of like Bridge Interactives or Zillow's, ad edit kind of module and Zenlist, where you could, they made those two things work together. So that was very, a very interesting thing to do as well. And, some people were using Google Sheets. Some people were using RPR. So everybody was trying to find a way to kind of win here. So, very, very interesting.
So my question for you though, Greg, is, did that surprise you at all? Like when they were able to stand something like that up and it's like, hey, we can now serve as your MLS like so quickly. Because it kind of surprised me.
Yeah, it was surprising.
I'll be honest. I was like, wait, really? I didn't, right? I didn't know you could do it that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there's like anything else technical or almost anything technical, you have the technical thing to do, which can be somewhat of like, okay, I have an API, you have an API, let's make this work, let's do this. But the other part is the human part. Like, well, if you don't get the message out to everybody, are only like 2% of the membership going to be using this, and does that matter? I guess if this had gone longer, you'd probably see more. I don't know what the adoption was. It could have been 100%. I mean,
sure.
But it's just, there's no, these things, it's a bad thing when this happens. There's no easy solution.
Of course.
But but no, to answer your question, I was a little bit surprised how fast that happened.
Yeah, because surprise for me was, like, you're exactly right. It's a terrible thing that it happened, but I guess I was still under the impression like the MLS data, the processes, the business rules, the whole system, I thought was kind of like separate. It was like kind of segregated over here, which is why a malware attack is so devastating. And then like just a couple of days later, it's like, hey, we're just going to stand up an emergency temporary solution. I was like, I thought it took longer than that.
I think Zillow with Bridge Interactive is one of the few, if one or the only one of the few players that have actually done the work in the past. If the MLS had allowed that to kind of work through the business rules and make the ad edit work and things like that. So that I don't think Bridge. I know it's available in a lot of markets, but not every market out there. San Francisco obviously was one of them.
So is the idea, in a sense, like the MLS data is in Zillow anyway? So what you just needed was like Zenlist to provide an ad edit of some sort?
Well, no, it was the other way around. So Zenlist had I guess Zillow in a sense has it also, but Zillow had the ad edit.
Zillow had the ad edit.
Yeah, or they had the ability to work with an ad edit module, right? So they have the API to work with it.
So Zenlist was the ad edit.
Well, I think I mean, to me, there's the presentation layer, and then there's the work underneath that. So it's a bit of both on both sides.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like that to me was the most kind of like, not surprising. I think that's the wrong word because it was more of a one eyebrow, as opposed to be like, oh my God, it wasn't that dramatic. But the one eyebrow thing for me was like, I always thought these systems were much more like self-contained, that I didn't think it was that easy to, essentially replace it, right, in a couple of days. And I'm going, well, judging by what just happened, it apparently is, right? And then it makes to mind, okay, so what's Real Estate Webmasters? Did they actually end up supporting that, or was it they're just going out and saying, going forward, we can serve as your kind of MLS hot backup?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I know that even in there was another story about North Star MLS had helped out EXP because, North Star MLS had developed their own ad edit module, which they've been using for a long time with Matrix. So they could plug into EXP's backend somehow. And there was a lot of, a lot of these kind of, I don't want to say jerry rigged, but some sort of rigged up solutions to get them over the hump. In the 2 weeks. I don't know if it's still going on in some other areas that are not completely up yet, but that was another instance where the two techs worked together on that.
Right. What do you think the impact of this will be on Rapattoni?
It really all depends upon their communications with their customers, right? I mean, I think there's an old adage out there that says like everybody, and I'll paraphrase it the way Greg would say this, and everybody fucks up, right? It's just how do you communicate? How do you let your customers know this and that? And I don't even know if I qualify this as a fuck up, because it could literally happen to anybody. But it hasn't happened to some of the players out there. But it's how you communicate, how you proceed going forward, right? So I think that's what's going to happen here.
You don't think this? I mean, again, you're right. It's not like their fault, right? It's not like something this was an outside attack, but the MLS is one of those things, like you have to have it. Like so.
No, totally, totally.
The Brooks agents, their clients, the associations who purchase their software to run the MLS. I mean, they have to be thinking like, hey, the communication is great. The customer service is great, but we didn't have an MLS for 2 weeks.
No, and that's something they're going to have to get over. I mean, I'm not going to here to say anything. I mean, there's a lot of great people working in Rapattoni, a lot of people I know there. I mean, I don't wish them ill at all. I mean, it's
absolutely.
They would wish this had never happened, right? So
sure,
yeah. But I'm not going to make any speculation on what their future is.
Because of all the like MLS sales type stuff, I've never really heard any of the vendors like really stress this like redundancy and security thing as much. It feels like that's going to have to be part of the language going forward, though. It's always been like features. Hey, we can do this, and we have this type of search, and not like, hey, we've got 17 backup sites and virtual machines and blah blah blah. Like this will never happen. Like I haven't heard that.
Well,
recently.
It's funny you say that, because I was recently at CoreLogic's Client Summit, right, which was here in Orange County, back when I was at Lone Wolf, and they emphasized the security thing in a full session. So it is actually starting to kind of get more in the mainstream here. So
yeah.
No, it was very serious and very impressive too. With what that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess like you're a big company like a Black Knight or a CoreLogic, right? That has this other government shit and everything else. I mean, to me, there's going to be a heightened sense of that kind of thing that only helps you out as one of the divisions of that big entity, right? So I was joking with somebody, like, I know back in the day working for LPS or Black Knight, but well, you had to have 2 cell phones, you had to do this. I mean, it was a pain in the ass, right? But there's reasons why things become a pain in the ass, because they've got to protect it, right?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting attack, man. And I don't know, like at some point the whole story's got to be told, right? Like, did Rapattoni pay the ransom, or did they say screw you and then we'll just reboot everything, right? Which to me is the braver mode, right?
Well,
don't pay them,
but hold on. I mean, we don't know what the malware was. The malware may have been they couldn't get into their own systems to reboot. I mean,
that's what ransomware would be.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, so it's like they couldn't rewrite Rapattoni all at once, right? I mean, every instance is custom. I mean, it's a horrible problem to have.
Yeah. God, I'm glad I never dealt with it. Have you ever had that type of attack in any of your systems?
No comment.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And it does make me think like brokers probably have to, especially if you're large.
Listen, if you're in a software company, in the last 10 years, you've either happened to you directly or been affected by it, right? So it's not it's prevalent. I mean, I remember back, these guys are just pirates. They're awful. And, I was always a big proponent, when Dan and I first started our first software company, and we had, it was called Iris. We had 2 other partners, and it was all on diskettes. And fucking agents would fucking copy those diskettes and just pass them out. And, it was just back in the day. Like, that's all people did. They didn't really respect, it's just software's whatever, right? And I was just like, God, just money's being stolen, right? So I've always had this kind of thing in my head about, and like, I never allowed my kids to download free music. I never really downloaded free music. I was just always a bit anal about that stuff because I knew the feeling of like, what we worked on so hard was been stolen, right? I mean, and this is just feels the same goddamn thing. It's like these bastards, just put them in jail forever, as far as I'm concerned.
So it turns out Greg is not a fan of China because IP theft is a big issue, with that particular economy, that particular country. Oh man, I don't know. Like my heart goes out to him. Like I said, what's interesting is learning kind of what the disaster recovery response is, right?
Yeah.
So in a way, for me, it's the event itself is interesting, but in a sort of, hey, we feel real bad for Rapattoni and everyone affected. What's more interesting is, okay, how everyone, like how the industry sort of reacted. And it feels like there's a lot more backup than I thought existed, in a sense, because a lot of the data is already in places like Zillow, in places like Zenlist.
Duplication's a thing, right? I mean, that's what we always talk about.
Real estate webmaster, right?
Yeah.
So the amount of duplication seems like the fact that CRMLS was able to go, hey, we can help you guys out. How? Do you have the data? It's like,
well, again, it's not
apparently they do.
They do, but I mean, that's only part of the problem, right? It is really the changes and how do you kind of do that? And that's a very tough problem to solve afterwards, right? So it's just like, it's better you just get back online as soon as you can, especially with like a database like an MLS database, which changes every 5 minutes, right? I mean, people are putting in new listings or changing statuses. Prices are going up and down. New photos are being added. Photos are being taken down. I mean, it's just, it's this living organic thing almost. It's just like, the more time that goes by, the worse the problem becomes.
Yeah. I mean, it occurs to me like there's got to be a better solution to this, overall. And I don't actually, I mean, my bet would be on something like blockchain.
To ransomware?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just a problem for real estate. It's a problem everywhere.
No, it's not. Yeah. But I guess what I was getting at is, like I said, because I built a company premised upon like leveraging blockchain and distributed ledger technology, I'm wondering if something like that might be the answer going forward, right? Because
you don't think that can be hacked and taken over by ransomware? Absolutely.
Not really.
Yeah. So
no, really.
Hold on, Rob. The worst thing you can tell a hacker is that it can't be done. So,
I mean, dude, all I can say is Bitcoin's been around for over 10 years, never been hacked. Right. Like that's one of the promise of this blockchain tech, that it's actually hack proof without using, maybe quantum computing or something.
Well, maybe
part of
the infrastructure isn't, but I mean, your website could be totally taken over and nobody can get into, do anything, right?
Well, that's the cool thing about blockchain, right? Is that you have multiple copies. Every node has the full copy. So even if you ransomware affected one node, right? Like, fine, that node gets taken down. Everyone else has the exact duplicate copy. So you could just stand it back up in the next, 5 minutes, right? It's just, again, it's part of it's just my fascination with that technology, right? I mean, I built a company on it, but part of it is like looking at things like this going, oh, wow, that's a use case where you don't need hot backups. You don't need any of this because it's already in place by the nature of the actual structure.
Okay, so you have a site that does, that manages auction, right? Somebody goes to a site, puts their bid in, another person puts a bid in. Yeah. If that site was taken over,
we'd be fucked.
Okay, so I mean, so there's still a, no matter what you're doing, you still could be affected by this.
No, but Greg, what I'm saying is, like, let's say that we were actually fully deployed, right, through kind of the blockchain architecture, right? Then the idea would be not just that, like, potentially every broker who participates in DPX would have a full node copy of DPX.
Even the data behind it.
All the data, even to some extent the code, right? Because the code's like out there, it's open source, right? So if our site then got ransomware attacked and got taken over, we just shut it down, right? Literally just shut it down and then reboot and then take it from one of the other nodes. Like, okay, here's all this stuff.
I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We're not there yet because we're a total startup, but I could imagine that type of architecture potentially being like the answer to all this sort of hacking and all this ransomware attacks and malware attacks, right? Because unless you affect the entire node, right, which is very, very hard. It's I'm not even sure what that even looks like. Right?
If you have all that data on there, the front end gets attacked, and there's changes being made to that database, and the only way, hold on.
Right.
And the primary way people make changes to the data on your database is through that interface. You'd still be in the same kind of situation.
How would that work? I mean, I guess what would end up happening is you would have multiple front ends, right? Because the idea is that you have, let's say, 10,000 databases.
Not front ends really, but multiple ad edits out there.
Multiple ad edits, but the way that you'd have to go about it is consensus along the nodes. We're getting way over the heads of most people, including myself. Yeah. So it occurs to me like this would be an interesting conversation with someone. I could actually think of somebody to talk about this if there's interest out there about what data security looks like in the sort of post-blockchain world, right? Because it is true, man. Blockchain has never been hacked. Different crypto projects, different companies have been hacked, but like the blockchain protocol itself I don't think it's ever been hacked. Especially Bitcoin has never been hacked, to my knowledge. There are other like wallets that get hacked, so you lose all your money. Like, yeah, but the entire network itself does not go down.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the data really didn't get hacked. It was the infrastructure around updating and doing things to that data and the controls that the company that made those systems couldn't get to those systems.
Oh, gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha. So they just locked out the web.
If you're locked out, you're locked out, right? I mean,
that's right.
I just don't know. I mean, I think that can happen to anything, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So the answer then is you got to have multiple front ends. You got to have multiple ways of interacting with the data.
Yeah, if you again an ad edit, and there's people working on it. You and I have been talking to, or you've been talking to some of those people.
Yep.
That's the real thing. If you had like a standard where other people could have their own ad edit modules that were going, and if there was still access to that database and not just the tools,
right.
there could be a way, right? They could get a database of the most recent data, and then tack on that ad edit, and then start going, right? Which is but we're a ways from there, unfortunately.
We're a ways from it, but that sounds like a fun project. I might build that. That actually sounds like a really cool project. There'll be a kind of a prop tech federation to do something like that. And something along those lines, Greg, is where, and I understand this feels like a total pivot. Do you remember a few years ago, I was really pushing the open source MLS software thing? That would help. I mean, if the code was open source, then there'd be tons of vendors who would have, hey, okay, you want to do an ad edit? Here's how you do it, right? Here's our version of it. And the data, as long as the data is not hacked and the data is not corrupted, you have a ransomware attack, cool, we got to shut down this front end. But here are 17 other vendors who have front ends to the same database. Just use one of those, right? So see, open source could be helpful. We should push open source again.
Yeah, I mean, it's still though. God bless Sam and all these other guys that are trying to do the Lord's work and getting some of this stuff done. But it's just, I was talking to an MLX exec the other day, and it's like, he says, man, I was just at lunch with agents and they wanted me to add three more fields. It just never fucking stops, right? I mean, it's just, oh God, yikes.
Yeah. All right. Well, like I said, this one, we kind of have to be a short one because I'm traveling. So we talk about this Rapattoni outage. Really unfortunate situation over there. But our lessons learned, you know, let's do that. What are your kind of your lessons learned from this event?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not sophisticated enough to know if there's anything that could have been done to prevent. You're just a target, and it's your turn in a sense here, right? And I don't know the specifics of like, did they handle it well? Did they handle it badly? I mean, it's a black hole. I mean,
Who knows?
I feel sorry for the engineers that are there that had to probably work 2 weeks, 24 hours a day trying to get this resolved for the customers out there. So, I mean, and I think, again, I think it's gonna matter on how they bounce back from this, right? I think that's gonna be the biggest thing here. And they'll probably end up with a lot more systems in place to hopefully try to prevent this from happening again in the future.
I agree. I think my lessons are exactly what you said. Plus, based on this, because we've brainstormed it here, my lessons learned are clearly, I think we need to look at multi-node, open source, hack resistant, takeover resistant systems and structures, right? And whether that's, we build it, like somebody else does it, I don't care, like whoever you're doing it, kind of the older ways of like, we have this database and we have hot backups and it's secure. I'm not sure if that's going to work anymore. I think we need to learn from this lesson and go, okay, what's the next way forward? Right. So we'll see. I'd be curious to hear from some of our more tech knowledgeable listeners about that, and whether I'm completely smoking crack, which is entirely possible, or if there's something there.
No, I mean, I think you've seen a prolonged thing happen here. What in the MLS world happens when this type of thing happens? And okay, so you've learned this lesson. How do we? And we know part of it is prevention, but no matter what you say about blockchain or anything else, in my opinion, anything can be hacked at some level, right? So it's just going to be a matter of not if, but when. So so the prevention thing is its own thing. But now that we have seen this happen, is there an opportunity here to learn from this and go, okay, what we need is X, and maybe X isn't like all the way at it, whatever, or maybe it's just like, okay, we roll up this thing temporarily that does the data dictionary fields, and that's good enough, and that's going to minimize the pain here, and that's a service or something there. So there's I'm sure there's a lot of engineers on all the MLS vendor side kind of thinking about the ways to kind of handle
the RESO Fall Conference should be fun, in other words, if you're a data security nerd, right? So maybe the CMLS conference will be fun if you're a data security nerd. So all right, well, good stuff. Hey, we'll see you back in the studio next week. Thanks to everybody for bearing with us, and thanks everyone.
Peace. Listen, content is everything. Two Brothers Creative makes it look easy. Right now, business owners really only have two options. The first option is hire a big firm. Now, this big firm's going to come in, make you think that they invented all the algorithms, and start charging you thousands of dollars every month. You don't want to do that. Second option is to do it yourself. Well, that means you got to learn SEO, SEM, copywriting, marketing techniques on the web. You should be really focusing on your own product. But now there's a third option. It's called Content in a Box. Give Two Brothers Creative 30 minutes a week and they'll handle everything. Plus, they'll show you how to bring it in-house later on. They'll rebuild your marketing foundation and give you tools and techniques and a new marketing playbook that'll actually produce real results and help you grow your business. Two Brothers Creative will give you the confidence and know-how to tell the SEOs and SEMs and all those other acronyms to get fucked. You're in control now. Get started today at thecontentbox.com.